Hi, I'm Mike. Welcome back to the shop. Today we're going to work on installing the thrust bearing for the rear gearbox bearing and also install the speedometer gear drive. This is the back end of the gearbox. We're going to install the thrust washer here and install a C-clip to hold that thrust washer in place. Now, there is very little bit of adjustment that you can do on the back once you get everything pressed in. So having a thrust washer, you have to get the right size. From the factory, there are 4 different sizes. Unfortunately, the thrust washer that we do have that came originally with the transmission when I tore it down is too wide, just barely. I can't get the C-clip to come in. Since I don't have other C-clips, other thrust washers from the factory, I have to improvise a little bit. What I've done is buy some Arbor shims from the internet, and I'm buying. Here's an example. I've got these are from Precision brand. These are Arbor shims, and I've got both 5/1000ths of an inch thick as well as 62 thousandths. And basically a combination of these, I've come up with a stack for the washers with 3 of the 5/1000ths and 1 of the other, and that fits perfectly. So what I'm going to do is install those on the shaft. I've got 3 of the 5/1000ths, and I'm putting those closest to the bearing, and I'm going to install the thicker one on the outside. Just because what I'm looking for is a little bit more stiffness against the C-clip. So those are installed. I'm going to put the C-clip on and use my C-clip installation and removal tool and just slide it into place. And that goes right into the groove. Once I get all the washers lined up. There, you hear it click in. Okay, so that's all taken care of. All right, next we're going to turn our attention to installing the speedometer gear drive, and that will rest on this raised surface. And this needs to be pressed into place. So I'm going to use our shop press again to press that into place. And one thing you need to be careful of when you're doing the installation is this is not a bonded piece of plastic. Actually, the gear drive is a piece of plastic. It's not bonded to the metal. Ask me how I know. I've separated others during another build. So you need to be very careful and use a bearing separator on the shop press in order to press this back in. And you need to make sure that the bearing press resides on the metal and not onto the plastic portion. So I'll get this set up off camera and show you how it's done. There's one other thing to note before we install the speedometer gear. It's actually there's a direction to put this on. There is a slight lead-in. It's hard to see on the film here. I'll see if I can get it a little bit closer. But there is a slight lead-in. Let's see. How do I get to? There it is. On one side, and there's a sharp lead-in on the other side that is not good for the input shaft or the speedometer drive shaft, which will be going in there. So I'm going to make sure that the tapered lead-in is installed closest to the back of the gearbox, because the speedometer gear comes in at this angle. So I'm going to install the taper on the inside facing towards the gearbox. The instruction manuals for Triumph does not make that distinction. So if you're working out of the instruction manual, be careful to install this in the right direction or the right orientation. Okay, over on the shop press, when I'm going to use the bearing separator, there's two sides of the bearing separator, the inside and the outside. I'm going to be using the outside, not the inside, of the bearing separator to give myself a flat surface to put the speedometer drive gear on, so that I don't strip the plastic portion off of the metal inner liner. When setting this up, make sure that you put an arbor plate in between the shop press and the input shaft. You don't want to damage the input shaft and the pilot on the input shaft. Down at the bottom you can see the speedometer gear. I'm going to put a little bit of assembly lube along the shaft to make it a little bit easier for this to come in. It won't take a lot of force, but lubrication is not a bad idea, so just put it on. Alright, now I'm going to slowly just press this into place. And it should line up onto the shoulder here on the shaft. I don't need to go very far, just have to have the outside of, or the inside of the drive gear line up with the other side of the shoulder on the shaft. Okay, that's done. Okay, now you can see that the speedometer drive gear is on the shouldered part of the shaft, and you can see there is shoulder on both sides. That's an acceptable installation. It's a little bit more shoulder on the output side than on the gearbox side, but again, you can see shoulder on both ends, so that's okay.